And I wanted to specifically talk about one particular trope among the synthetic left. It's like an obsessive trope among the synthetic left. If you read the writings of Partisan Review, so Partisan Review magazine was a socialistic left-wing cultural magazine that was basically set up by the CIA, all funded by the CIA. But a lot of left-wing intellectuals were promoted there, right? George Orwell wrote for Partisan Review. Susan Sontag got her start at Partisan Review. And one particular theme, and Hannah Arendt, right, who coined totalitarianism and was promoting this idea that the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany were the same, they all have this weird reinterpretation of fascism and what fascism was. But if you want to understand fascism, you really ought to read R. Palm Dutt. R. Palm Dutt wrote this very, very good book called Fascism and Social Revolution. R. Palm Dutt was the leader of the Communist Party of Britain, and this book is very, very good. And basically, what fascism is this. When capitalism enters a crisis, there's mass unemployment, people are hungry, they don't have jobs, there's instability in society. The ruling class wants things to be stable. They also want to fix the economy. And so in order to do it, one section of the ruling class will seize power and start suppressing other sections of the ruling class. Now that's called bonapartism. However, in order to conduct a form of bonapartism, that section of the ruling class will build up a mass movement among the workers, right? You have social democratic Bonapartists like Roosevelt, right? But you also have fascist Bonapartists like Hitler and Mussolini. And the way that fascist Bonapartists go about fixing the economy is with mass killing, death, and destruction. They create a very authoritarian military state centered around destructive things like prisons, like war, like, in order to try and save the economy. That's what fascism is, right? That's what fascism is. That's how Marxists have always understood it. They've understood fascism as a form of Bonapartism. And if you read Hitler's Banker, that's pretty clear what it is, right? Fascism is a form of Bonapartism. It's one section of the ruling class violently killing and tearing things down and destroying people in the hopes of saving capitalism. That's what it is. That's what it's always been. And in fact, R. Palm Dutt, in his book, Fascism and Social Revolution, he lays it out pretty well. This is 1932. He's writing this. He says, 2 alternatives, and only 2, confront the existing society at the present stage of development of productive forces and social organization. One is to throttle the development of productive forces in order to save class society, to destroy material wealth, to destroy millions of superfluous human beings in the slow rot of starvation and the quick furnace of war, to crush the working class movement with limited violence, to arrest the development of science and culture, and to turn to ever more destructive war as the supreme aim of each imperialist bloc striving to find a way for itself at the expense of its rivals, and thus save for a while the rule of the possessing classes at the expense of a return to barbarism and spreading decay. This is the path that finds its most complete organized expression in fascism. The other is to organize the productive forces for the whole of society by abolishing class ownership of the means of production and building up the classless communist society, which alone can utilize and organize modern productive forces. This is the path of communism, of the revolutionary working class. The issue of these 2 paths is the issue of the present epoch. It is to the former of these 2 alternatives that the existing capitalist world of today is moving at an increasing pace, to which it will more and more visibly develop in the period ahead, if the revolutionary working class does not succeed in the time in saving the whole future of civilization and human culture. That's what fascism is. Fascism is when capitalism is in a crisis, one section of the bourgeoisie takes power, it unleashes barbarism, it puts people in prisons, it executes people, it centralizes the military, and it tries to save capitalism with war, death, repression, and destruction, right? That's why Mussolini, what did he do? He colonized Africa, right? He rained brutal repression down on the people of Libya who were fighting for their independence around Omar Mukhtar and others. He invaded Ethiopia, and that's why, Hitler restarted the armaments industry, he built the autobahns, he put a whole bunch of people in concentration camps. It's beating people down. Mass destruction by one section of the ruling class in order to save capitalism. That's what fascism is, right? It's an attempt to save capitalism with mass destruction. It's rooted in the crisis of overproduction. The capitalist is constantly trying to increase technology. In doing that, he eliminates workers from the means of production. As a result, products can't be sold. You have an economic crisis. It's the same thing that happened in the 30s. Overproduction, underconsumption, right? When the capitalist advances technology and creates poverty and creates lots of overproduction, the built-in problems of capitalism result in the situation where there's mass unemployment and the capitalists attempt to save their system with mass destruction, right? That's what fascism is. Marxists have always understood that, until now. This book is hard to find. Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt is very hard to find. Not widely discussed. And if you go into left-wing circles now, people don't know what fascism is. Right? In the 1930s, the communists, they knew exactly what fascism was. They understood it. The Trotskyists, Leon Trotsky understood what fascism was. He had a little bit of a different interpretation. He focused on middle class and armed groups, but he knew what it was. Everybody knew that fascism was an attempt to save capitalism with violence and destruction. It was rooted in the problems of capitalism. But not now. Folks, there's an individual called Wilhelm Reich. Has anyone ever heard of Wilhelm Reich? Wilhelm Reich was a German psychoanalyst. He was born in Austria, Austrian-born psychoanalyst. He was a friend of Sigmund Freud, and he was in the German Communist Party. And he basically believed that the cause of Hitler coming to power was sexual repression. And he was kicked out of the German Communist Party. He wrote a book called The Mass Psychology of Fascism. And the German Communist Party saw that book and said, this is a bunch of malarkey. It's a bunch of bull honky. And we are just getting rid of him. And they kicked him out of the party. And the book basically said that the reason Hitler had come to power in Germany was because parents in Germany were not letting their kids masturbate. It's nuts. You read it, it's nuts, right? People, when they don't have sex, energy builds up inside their body, and they want a leader, and so they find fascist movements as an expression of their sexual pent-up desires. It's nuts! It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? Maybe there are problems with sexual repression, sure, but sexual repression is not the cause for Hitler coming to power in Germany. And he publishes this book. Sigmund Freud said it was nuts, kicked him out of the Freudian movement. The German communists kicked him out, and kicked him out of their movement. It was a nutty theory. And Wilhelm Reich was nuts, and he believed all mental illness was caused by lack of sexual satisfaction. If you just have enough orgasms, you will never be mentally ill. And if you just have enough orgasms, there won't be fascism. This guy was a nut, right? And he fled Germany, obviously, moved to the United States. And in the United States, he set up a cult. A cult, right? And he believed that orgasms, the sexual orgasm, created this magical energy called orgone. And it was this magical energy that was in the universe called orgone. And he started selling people these boxes that they were supposed to masturbate inside of, and so the orgone would stay in there. It was nuts, and it was fraud. Albert Einstein inspected one of his boxes and said, this is, malarkey, you're a liar. But he had a cult, right? And people say it was like the beginning of some of the other cults we've seen. And he ended up they cracked down on him. It was fraudulent. He was just a liar. So you would think nobody would take Wilhelm Reich seriously. This is just some crackpot in Germany, right? This is just a crackpot, a German crackpot. The communists kicked him out because he wrote this book that was outrageous. Right, the Freudians kicked him out, but I have here in my hand Adorno, called The Authoritarian Personality by Theodor Adorno. Theodor Adorno is one of the main thinkers of the New Left. And who does Theodor Adorno, in his book, The Authoritarian Personality, who does he cite as one of his great influences on the cause of fascism? Wilhelm Reich. And let me add that Wilhelm Reich announced that the Soviet Union were red fascists. They were fascists, just like Nazi Germany, right? He was basically a trot. He was a trot psychoanalyst. who had nutty theories about orgone energy and all that. Well, this book that I have here in my hand, which is like sacred reading, this is an essential text of understanding the new left, right? This is the Frankfurt School. Theodor Adorno, the Frankfurt School. This is one of their central texts. It cites Wilhelm Reich as one of their main thinkers. It cites Wilhelm Reich. And if you read this book, this is a study. This was Theodor Adorno, who was a Marxist, founder of the part of the Frankfurt School, theoretician of music. He and Nevitt Sanford, a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, were paid by, some nonprofits to conduct all this research into the cause of fascism. And they developed this thing called the F scale, right? F stood for fascist. It was how fascist you are, right? And they developed this theory of what they called the authoritarian personality, drawing from Wilhelm Reich and going around and interviewing people. And they rated people on this scale of how fascist they were. And you were fascist if you had very, very strong beliefs, if you didn't like ambiguity, if you didn't like modern sexual practices, if you liked certain types of music but not other types of... it's just silliness. This is, and Adorno was promoted by the CIA. They in Partisan Review, was in the English-speaking world. The German CIA-funded left-wing magazine was called Der Monat. And Adorno, that's where he was being promoted. The Congress for Cultural Freedom, operation was promoting Adorno. And even the person who wrote The Authoritarian Personality, Nevitt Sanford, along with Adorno, who wrote this book, the person who wrote it with him, Nevitt Sanford, where had he worked? He'd worked at the Tavistock Institute, the Tavistock Institute for Social Research, which was set up by British intelligence during World War II as a place to conduct psychological research. So this whole narrative, and if you read Hannah Arendt and The Banality of Evil, right? If you read Hannah Arendt on totalitarianism, it's this whole way to avoid. They don't want to talk about the actual cause of fascism. They don't want to talk about the Great Depression. They don't want to talk about overproduction. They don't want to talk about bonapartism. They don't want to talk about how capitalism creates these crises and it's unstable. They want to talk about authoritarian personalities. They want to talk about masturbation and Wilhelm Reich. It's a joke, but it's a way to bury the brilliance of the Marxist understanding. Marxists understand why fascism originated. Marxists understand it. Those folks don't. Wilhelm Reich did not. And it's a way to obscure and cover up the actual Marxist understanding of why fascism has taken place. And it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal, because we're in a period where there's mass unemployment. We're in a period where, capitalists are replacing workers with machines. All this stuff is happening. And instead of talking about, what it's really about, instead of going back to the economics of capitalism, bonapartism, and all of that, instead of doing that, oh, no. We're talking about Wilhelm Reich. We're talking about people who don't like ambiguity, who like certain types of music. I mean, there's a reason that the CIA paid for this. There's a reason. There is a reason that the CIA paid for this stuff. There's a reason that Adorno was promoted by the Congress for Cultural Freedom, that they subsidized his work. Susan Sontag said that communism is fascism, successful fascism, the most successful variant of fascism. That's what she said. How is communism fascism? Well, it is. And actually, in one of her essays, she declares that gymnastics is fascist. She declares that if you try to liquidate feelings of alienation by building up group settings, you must be fascist. Right? Fascism is people in groups fighting for a cause. I mean, this reinterpretation of fascism as conformity, as people getting together and working in groups, and it's all because they didn't masturbate enough. This is nuts. And my new book, I'm talking about this. I'm doing all kinds of research. I've been reading about the New York intellectuals, Hannah Arendt, Susan Sontag, where they originated, Partisan Review, Irving Howe. I've been reading about Wilhelm Reich, and I am writing a book on the synthetic left that will blow you all away. I'm talking about the socialist who betrayed socialism, Margaret Sanger, right? Margaret Sanger was the leader of the Socialist Party in New York City, a big donator to the IWW, the Wobblies, but she sold out socialism for sex and started getting funded by the Rockefellers to promote Malthusianism. That narrative, that fascism is rooted in psychology and sexuality, not rooted in the problems of capitalism. It is a poisonous narrative, and it's a way to cover up the actual cause. It's a way to avoid the actual discussion. What actually happened? Why did fascism happen? Fascism is caused by capitalism in decay. Fascism is caused by capitalism in decay. And the CIA has worked so hard to obscure that. They go out of their way to obscure the actual causes of fascism and cover them up. And it's wrong. It's unacceptable. Hannah Arendt, Susan Sontag, Adorno, Wilhelm Reich. This stuff is nuts. And it's problematic. Some people are more likely to join groups, and some people aren't. Some people are more conforming than others. Some people are more obedient than others. That's not the cause of fascism. Fascism is rooted in capitalism in crisis, and they have spent millions of dollars. The CIA, the U.S. intelligence agencies have spent millions of dollars, along with the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller think tanks, to keep you from understanding that. To convince you that fascism is about music. It's about, people not liking jazz music and listening to classical music. Fascism's about porn not being accessible. Anything. Fascism is caused by parents spanking their children. Fascism is caused by too much religion in society. No, fascism is rooted in the problems of capitalism. Nobody knows about any of this stuff, right? I talk to people about U.S. history and Henry Ford and Henry Morgan and the Rockefellers and how they were with Roosevelt. No one knows any of that stuff. All of this has been obscured by this weird psychoanalytical social liberalism narrative that says fascism is a mental illness. It's just a mental illness caused by sexual repression and authoritarianism and groupthink, and it avoids all of the important conversations. We need desperately to be talking about economics right now. But the ruling class has spent millions and millions of dollars so that we talk about this.